Okay, you're going to have to forgive me if I just smile and giggle through this entire interview because this is my dear friend and a woman I look up to and admire so very much. I want to welcome you to the Shift series, Dawn. This is Dawn Gibson. Dawn, welcome.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. I can't believe it took us this long to do this.
I know.
So giddy knowing that we were going to talk today. So I want to describe what you do to the audience, but I also feel like you are a woman who defies all boxes and all labels. I could say that you're a psychotherapist, but you are so much more than that. I could say you're a social worker. You are so much more than that. I could say that you're a mom of 3 beautiful children. You are so much more than that. There is so much to tell. I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you came to be doing the work that you're doing.
Well, I've been in practice for 15 years. That's when I got my master's degree. And for a long time, I spent my time working in the schools. I was very passionate about working with teenagers, specifically teenage girls. And that was what I noticed one of my strengths and something I really loved. And over time, I had several different jobs and worked with women and homeless families and I did all kinds of things. And so I finally got to a point when I was working in the schools providing counseling to children and to their parents as well. In some cases, I finally got to the point where I felt like there had to be more, or there had to be a better way of working with people, because they would come in and we would talk and then they'd leave, they'd come back and we would talk and they'd leave. And even in my own personal work, that because I do personal transformation for myself as well, so I can be clean and clear for my clients. And even with myself, I was noticing it just wasn't enough, that there had to be something deeper and more effective. And that's when I learned about Hakomi body-centered psychotherapy. And so I went through a training called Hakomi body-centered psychotherapy. And I did the first year. I didn't do all of it, but I did the first year. And that's when it really opened my mind to the idea of mindfulness, the idea of really how our bodies store trauma on a cellular level, and how we can help hold space for a client and move them into that place so they can really get to the root of what's been causing their problems in their lives and keeping them stuck and continuing the patterns that they have. And what I do now is I do utilize mindfulness, but I also incorporate my own spin on things. So I would not say by any means that I'm a Hakomi body-centered psychotherapist, and I also do coaching, but I do utilize mindfulness, I utilize energetics, I bring in the mindset shifting. So it's really, healing on a physical level, healing on an emotional level, shifting your mindset, and then also connecting spiritually. I feel like we're whole people, and so it's really important that all of these things are touched on as the healing progresses. And so that's where I am now, and I love it. It's really amazing to watch people shift and change and get to a place where they just kind of look at me like, how did we get here? Like, how did we get here just from tuning in to the physical sensations? And it's mind-blowing a lot of times, honestly, and it does help people make shifts in their lives. So I feel like it's much more impactful and effective and much quicker at getting to the root than just talking about problems and kind of spinning on the hamster wheel a little bit.
Well, and there you've touched on it. I mean, there's so many of us who have been either through therapy or personal development, and we're at a point where we don't really just want to process anymore. I mean, we've processed, we've forgiven, we've intellectualized healing, but we still may be dealing with anxiety, overwhelm, insomnia, this evidence through the body that there's still some disquiet somewhere on a cellular level. So if we were to work on that together, how would a session be different than, say, a traditional psychotherapy? What would I experience? I've actually had a session, so I'm lying here because it's so good.
So when women are open, I work mainly with women, and so when they're open to going into the body, because it can be scary, especially if you have had physiological issues come up, it can be really scary to go there because you've spent so much time disconnecting from the body because the body has been a source of pain or heartache or whatever it is for each person. And so first I would make sure that was an okay thing to do. But so we would just sit both feet on the floor, I would take them through a process of tuning into the different areas of their body, and then after they do the full process of going through the physical sensations, we see where the body takes us. And so it's an exploration. It's about being curious, doing our best to stay out of the judgments in the mind, out of the stories of the head, the mind chatter, if you will. And then from there, you know, if a person, let's say, has a tightness in their chest, then we will stay with that for a while. And eventually what happens is either the physical sensations move to a different part of the body, which is maybe the deeper issue or the deeper part. Right. And then once we sit there for a moment and I ask different questions about, you know, are there any images that come up? Is there a memory, a person, a feeling, a color even? And from there, we just, it's not a complicated process, but it's
powerful.
I really just use my intuition, honestly, and I see where I need to go, and sometimes I can see what's happening with them and where we need to go that may not make sense to them in the moment, but then it eventually comes back around. And so from that, we get to the core feeling, the core emotions that are keeping them stuck, and then eventually we also get to a place where they can see where it started. So if it was in their early childhood, they're able to recognize, oh, this is how I felt around my dad, or this particular situation happened to me, and then we look at how is that playing itself out in your life today and in your relationships, and then they're able to have more awareness. And the cool thing about it is it helps people turn off the brain a bit and really get to the core of who they are, get into their intuitive space, start trusting themselves more, but then also it helps them become conscious of things that have been unconscious. And so they can feel their bodies once they're aware of how their body feels in the session, in these, let's say when they're anxious, they're able to recognize and identify it in their lives much more quickly, and so then they can go into that space and calm themselves more quickly. It's really cool. I really do love it. It
is, and it was so powerful for me. I hadn't realized how much time I was still spending out of my body, having come out of chronic illness. And when we did the session, I was a little bit afraid of what I was going to find getting back in my body. And it was a really powerful and transformative experience for me, because I had kind of the inverse experience to what you're describing. When I got in there, a little braced for what I was going to feel, I found out that I'm not in pain anymore and that I am safe in my body. And it brought up a lot of emotion for me, because I realized how far I've come, but how I hadn't even really claimed the peace that was emerging in my body because of the wound of having been uncomfortable for so long. And I imagine you touched on the reverse, the staying out of our body because it's still too painful, whether that's chronic illness, whether that's anxiety and overwhelm. So as we sink into our body and we start to become aware of the anxiety, what do you see in people as those layers start to peel away? Because I know anxiety and overwhelm, we were saying before, it's like the modern epidemic. There almost isn't a person who isn't walking around at a high level of alert. So what do you notice in people that work with you as that starts to fall away?
How do they start shifting?
Yeah. What does that shift look like?
So what the shift looks like, I mean, it's different for every person.
Sure.
So for some, it means that they feel calmer when they're parenting their children, or they're recognizing the patterns they're passing down to their children, and they become more aware.
Yes.
And so they can make shifts in that. Or for some women, it means that they become more confident. They trust their intuition more. They look less outside of themselves for the validation, for the people, instead of looking to others for decisions and helping them make decisions. Because most anxious people I work with, that's one of the big things, is they're very indecisive. They're afraid of making the wrong decisions. They're afraid they're screwing everyone in the family up, or that they'll never get out of that. And so I start seeing shifts in those things, in those areas as well. A lot of times they start setting better boundaries with their partners, and they start voicing their truth more. So whether that's letting their partner know something that they were afraid to tell them in the past, or whether it's setting specific boundaries with their children that they've been afraid to set for fear of their children not loving them, or whatever it is happening for them. I mean, it really truly is different for each person, but overall, I would say that they have a better sense of who they are. They don't stay in their heads as much. They feel confident, and they feel a lot calmer and more connected in their bodies and also in their relationships.
That's huge. Having helped so many women transform out of that state of chronic in the brain hamster wheel stuff, what do you see in the people who are having a hard time breaking out? Like, what is it that holds us back from claiming that piece? What are the recurring blocks or recurring patterns you see?
The recurring patterns
that prevent us from claiming the kind of healing that you're talking about.
So most of it is the self-judgment, and I feel like it's really the stories that we were taught about ourselves as we grew up. So what I explain to women is that, yes, you have this story in your head about yourself. And if you really dig deeper and you really go back to childhood, you'll recognize that that's actually the story that you were told by your parents or by your teacher or by a caregiver, whoever it might have been for you. And so what happens is they just stay in that cycle of the story. And so because they believe that story about themselves, they unconsciously recreate these patterns in their lives that validate that story for them.
Yeah.
So, if I'm having trouble thinking of a specific example.
No, yeah, I absolutely get it. And I get how that touches into your work and how the change we create in ourselves affects what we're passing down to our children. Because I'm imagining that anxiety and overwhelm are also somewhat learned behaviors.
Yes, they are, and that's what I mean. So part of it is we take them on from our parents. So maybe one or the other parent was anxious, and then two is we are told things about
our
ourselves
story
that are not to be true. We were squashed. Our parents had a lot of expectations of us. It didn't really match who we were as children, and so that can be really confusing as well if we're not fully able to express ourselves as children, which most of us probably weren't.
Yeah.
And I know it's changing. I see it changing all over the place with parents being a lot more conscious about how they perceive their children and how they interact with them.
Yeah.
But more times than not, I mean, it's an unconscious pattern that has been passed down from the parents, but that involves the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves.
So help me on this one. This is one we probably all face, and I know I've seen clients struggle with too. They decide to take this journey with you, Dawn. They're ready to release their story and change their pattern. They're still within a dynamic of a partnership, or maybe still with those parents. How do we navigate that piece where we may be seeking to change our relationship to a story, but it's still anchored around us to some degree?
That's tricky. I mean, it is. It's very tricky, especially when you're in a relationship and that person, you've already created a specific dynamic. And so first they need to know that it is going to shift, because when you have already created a dynamic or a pattern in your relationship, which we all bring our own attachment issues into our relationships. And so we each have our own way that we attach to our parents, and we bring those into our relationships, and that creates some of those the issues that come up in our relationships. But I feel like if the more we focus internally and the more we focus on ourselves, those things aren't as challenging or difficult or problematic, because if we're spending most of our time looking at how can I create the life I want, how can I make shifts that feel good to me, what can I do, then we're not spending that time blaming the other person and thinking about how horrible they are, or how they're screwing up our lives, or how negative they are. And then what happens over time is, as we start shifting, clearly our relationship's going to shift, and it may be uncomfortable for a while, and the other person may not like that at all, and because it's changing the whole relationship. It's changing the way that you previously saw yourselves together, and it can be very scary for the other person sometimes. Yeah. And so it's just a lot of communication, a lot of, open communication about what you're going through, how you're shifting, what you're wanting, and then also setting strong boundaries. So for example, if you've been caught in this negative cycle with a person, setting boundaries around that negativity when they walk in the door. Hey, I know you had a hard day. I'm willing to listen to you for 5 minutes, and then I'd like to hear some great things that happen in your day, because most of us know at this point in time that what we appreciate appreciates. And so what you put your attention and focus on is what gets magnified. And I've seen that in my own life, in my own relationship.
Sure.
When you're caught in the blame game, guess what? You're miserable.
Yeah.
And when you start looking at the beauty in your marriage and your relationship, then that expands, and the person eventually expands. And if they don't, sometimes we do grow out of our partnerships, and that may be what happens to some women, and I have seen that happen as well. So it's a lot of navigating, especially with another person involved.
It is. So you've seen some of this in your own life, I know, and you also managed to stay clear, grounded, be a leader in your community. So much great opportunity coming your way, Dawn. You have a tremendous light and glow around you. What are some of your own core routines for how you both show up and serve in such a powerful way, but also mom, partner, business owner, radiant woman? I want to know the inside story of the core routines.
My core routines?
Yes.
Okay, so I would say my main routines are meditating. I don't meditate every day, but I do it when I can. So my goal is usually 3 times a week at least. What I've been doing lately, which it's really been uplifting me a lot, and it's been really amazing, is in the morning for 5 to 10 minutes I have this meditation that I listen to, and it's just water and music, and I visualize what I want in my life. I just lay there and I feel it and I see it and I embody it, and that's how I start my day now. And at the end of the day, one of the things I do, I have another thing I listen to, and I have been journaling, 10 gratitudes every night, 10 things I love, 10 things I desire, and then what energy in and energy out. So 3 to 5 things that took energy from me,
sure,
and then 3 to 5 things that filled me up, so I can kind of see where that balance is and what's happening with that. I have been practicing Koya. I do that at least once a week, and you can Google that. It's amazing. It's so amazing. I'm about to do the first part of the training for that too, so I'm really excited because I want to incorporate more of that into my business as well and into my own personal life, and create my own classes for myself.
Yes.
And what else? And then, in terms of being with my kids, my kids are all at 3 different schools. I do a lot of commuting. And that used to be really, really hard and taxing on me, and I have shifted my attitude around that. Like, I've been very conscious about, I can be irritated that I'm driving that long, even though it's for them, and I want them in those schools, or I can find ways to really connect with them while we're in the car and to enjoy our commute. And so I've been doing more of that. And with my partnership, just with any partnership, it's one of those things where sometimes you're super connected and other times you kind of start growing apart and you just come back together. And so really being conscious about when those disconnects start happening and opening up conversation, talking about it. He travels a lot, and so it's tricky, and when you're single parenting for a long time, the partner comes back, you have to navigate that as well and include them back into the family. And so with that, I would say we do talk every day when he's out of town as well, and so we keep the communication as open as possible.
That's great.
And then I drink a lot of tea, and I go to acupuncture once a week too. And so I really make an effort to move my body, to connect spiritually, to really look at the way I'm thinking in life. And then I also do check in and see how I'm feeling. And if I am having a particularly hard day, I sit with it and I just allow it to be. Whether it's sadness, I let myself cry. If it's anger, I allow myself to be angry. I don't stew in it and I don't stay in it. I feel it in my body and I allow it to move through. I allow the energy to move through my body. And so those are the main things that I do to stay in the place that I've been in.
I love that because it's part awareness, part gratitude practice, allowing what is, all of these things that we strive for, but also fundamentally you're modeling a really beautiful level of self-care, which is something I think we all need and we can all benefit from more of in our lives.
Absolutely.
So
perfect every time. Just like with any mom, you have to, it's like, oh, I really need to take this time for myself. I mean, because otherwise you can get blown away with all of the responsibilities you have.
I just have to ask this. How much is that word perfection tied to this anxiety overwhelm? I mean, is that the common denominator?
Yes. Yeah.
Is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whatever we perceive perfection to be or we're told we need it to be, that word kind of touches on all of it.
It does, absolutely. So even when working with women, even if I'm asking them to implement a self-care routine, I'm very gentle in the way that I suggest it, because some will, I didn't do it, and they'll feel guilty, or, and it's more of like the self-judgment is the judgment around, I didn't do it the way I was told. I have this expectation of myself that is incredibly too high for any human to accomplish on a regular basis. But absolutely, that's a huge, huge tie-in.
So at least becoming aware of where that word, or where where we carry it and what it means, and then how to shift our level of kindness to ourselves around these expectations. Compassion. Well, I want to tell everyone where they can find you online, but first I love to ask everybody, if there were just one thing, a person may be feeling anxious or overwhelmed, or just not really knowing where to start on their journey towards wellness or healing or recovery from chronic illness, what is one thing you could recommend that they could start doing, that anybody could do to begin to see a shift in their lives?
Anybody? So without money being an issue, or
ideally, if there were just one thing that probably everybody would have access to, what would that be?
I would say meditation, but I would also say checking in with your body, noticing the physical sensations, noticing how you're feeling. If you're feeling anxious, go to the anxiety. Don't run away from it. Go to the anxiety and notice, is it in your chest? Is it in your stomach? Is it in your head? And just be with it and allow it and see what happens. It should shift within 1 to 2 minutes.
Just by bearing witness to it.
Just by bearing witness to it and just breathing through it and being in it.
Oh, that gives me chills stuff. That's amazing. Well, so tell us where we can find you online.
Okay. I'm at dawngibson.com, and that's Gibson.
Great. And
do you want me to talk a little bit about...
Yeah, tell us what we'll find there. I would love people to know that you do take private clients, and I know we're not sure exactly where you're headed with your program, but you're constantly creating and crafting, and right now you have developed a model of doing this work in group form, and this may change over time, but it's a fascinating thing to be able to bring women together in a circle to do this work together. So tell us what we would find on your website.
So right now you'll find my private one-on-ones, which I call Woman Rising, and it's a 3-month one-on-one program. Most of my clients continue with me after the 3 months, but that's where we start, is a 3-month commitment.
Great.
And that is really organic, and it's based on what you need as a client, and it's getting into your body and doing all the things that I've been talking about. And I also have Woman Ignited program that I'm running right now, and the doors are closed on that. And like you said, Lindsay, I am constantly creating, and that one encompasses all of the things that we just talked about, really helping moms specifically get to that place of feeling calm and confident and breaking patterns that they don't want to pass down to their own children, and getting into a place in their lives that they feel good, incorporating the mindset and the spiritual and the emotional and the physical, the movement. And I'm super excited about that. But I will be incorporating more of that into my one-on-ones as well.
Well, it's so exciting, and I'm going to keep an eye out for the Dawn K. Gibson version of Koya therapy, whatever that is. And I'm just so thankful that you're out there doing this work in the world. It's really transformative and powerful, and I wish it for every woman to begin to honor and see what's going on in their own body and experience the kind of shifts that bearing witness to that can bring about. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed it.
Much, much love and gratitude. Bye-bye.